Hi everyone from Giaco. After living over a decade in Finland, I decided to help building a bridge between the English-speaking people living in Finland and the local community. Listen to my podcast to discover the most interesting and incredible people from Finland and to dig into Finnish culture and controversial issues that impact all of us in our daily life. And now sit back and enjoy listening. Bye! Hi everyone. The following is a conversation with Alexander Stubb, the candidate for the presidential election of Finland 2024. He represents the Kokoomus party, so the National Coalition Party. With him, we talk about his career, his political views, and how he sees the role of the president in these turbulent times. It was a pleasure to interview such an energetic and driven politician. Please enjoy. Hi, Alexander.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm doing good.
So, thank you for allowing this interview to happen. I know you are super busy times, but thank you for this time. I'm sure that also the listeners will be happy to hear from you directly. And so, you have a wonderful career in politics. If you open up a bit what you've been doing, you've been a member of the parliament, of course. You have been prime minister. You've been also in the EU in some different positions. If you fast go through and tell like who you are and what is your career been like?
Yeah, I mean, I'd kind of want to go through three careers. I mean, one to a certain extent is in academia, which I felt very strongly about when I started studying in the US in 1989. At one stage, I wanted to become a lifelong academic, which I've now fulfilled as well by being in Florence as a professor and director at the School of Transnational Governance. The second one is civil service. So at some stage I felt that, well, academia is kind of cool, but given that I'm in social sciences or political science, international relations, it would be nice to test my hypothesis. And I was a civil servant, not a real diplomat. I was always employed by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but I wasn't in the diplomatic service. Quite enjoyed that. And at some stage I made the jump to politics in 2004 to the European Parliament and was there for 4 years until I was called in to become foreign minister. Bit of a surprise. It was a bit of a difficult situation at the time and did that and stayed in government for 8 years in different positions, foreign minister, trade minister, Europe minister, prime minister and finance minister. And then I left politics pretty much 2016, 2017 to join the European Investment Bank in Luxembourg. So quite a diverse career in many ways. I've quite enjoyed it so far.
So you have, so you've been studying abroad. You've been studying also in France.
Yeah,
am I correct?
Yeah, I've studied in the U.S., in France, in Belgium, and then I did my PhD at the London School of Economics.
So you have been exposed to many different cultures, many different way of thinking, behaving, and working. What kind of extra value do you think that all this has given to you?
Well, it gives some diversity, I guess, but I think I should be fair that my DNA is very much in the West. So, it's Anglo-Saxon to a certain extent, then later on became wannabe Francophone and now wannabe Italian as well. So my experiences are essentially from countries that have a Western orientation. Believe in liberal democracy and social market economy and globalization. So I've lived in the US for a total of 5 years. I lived in the UK for a total of 2 years, Belgium almost 10 years, France 1 year, Luxembourg 3 years, and Italy 4 years. So, but all of those countries are what I call, quite nice welfare states. Okay, the
Indeed.
US you could argue, but yeah, I guess you're exposed to a certain level of diversification in that, in a good kind of a way. But I can't say that I've had, the hardship diversity. I've never lived in Africa. I don't have the Asian experience in the same way that many of my friends might have. I haven't lived in Latin America and I don't speak Spanish. So, I've had a certain, how would I say, subjective life.
But I guess still anyway you've learned diplomacy, of course, through politics, but also to being exposed to different kind of people. You've learned the way of talking. I was researching that you were part of this crisis management initiative.
Yeah.
That I find it extremely interesting because anyway we are in time of conflict and you were trying to do the opposite.
Yeah, I mean, I guess to a certain extent, I've had a diverse life, but I guess the defining thing has been international relations in one way or another. So I am by definition an international Finn, having lived abroad and then lived in Finland and having been in a decision maker's position and being outside of it as well. CMI, Martti Ahtisaari's Peace Foundation, that was one of the greatest honors bestowed upon me when Martti asked me to do that in 2017, because it was an organization that he himself had founded. And I have done that for 6 years now. And we're involved right now in 25-ish active conflicts around the world. We were asked in 2022 to participate in over 100 conflicts or dialogues around the world. So, you get a certain touch. But I'm only chairman of the board. It's all the employers of CMI that do the work, 80 of them with fairly permanent contracts, and then about 100 consultants. So it's been a great experience to see how things work from the civil society side as well.
So great achievements, and you've been always being involved in great stages. And then you were in Italy as a professor. What made you come back and be a candidate for the presidential elections, and then for the Kokoomus?
I guess the short answer is to say that this was not in the cards had not Russia and Putin attacked Ukraine. As a family, we had pretty much taken the decision that I will be outside of Finnish politics. But I had never closed the door for the presidency, in the sense that I feel that it is the most international job that you can have in Finnish politics. Okay, bar from being, say, commissioner or secretary general of the UN. But the bottom line is that if you're based in Finland, it doesn't get much more international than that. And then we started the conversation at home. My wife is dual national, British-Finnish, and she felt quite strongly at the time that perhaps it would be useful to do one more round, and because it's always a fight between freedom and responsibility. And I enjoyed 7 years of freedom outside of politics. It does magic for your brain. See, you're able to read and write and discuss. And for me, it was very inspirational to be in Florence as well at the European University Institute, or has been, because we basically set up a new public policy school there, and it's gone from strength to strength. Not much thanks to me, but thanks to the people who work there. So it was a big decision, of course, but once you take the decision, you go beyond a point of no return. And in Finnish, there's this saying that doesn't translate that well into English, but basically, when your country asks you, you go.
So the responsibility you feel, it's the call from the nation.
Well, it's a call. There's sort of an inner alarm bell that tells you that you have a certain set of experiences that might be useful in this political situation. And sometimes in politics, and especially for the presidency, it's a question of supply and demand. So some people try to supply themselves a little bit too much, even if there's no demand. But at some stage you sense that, well, there might be a demand, and then you supply yourself. And I always wanted to look at it like that. So I never felt that I had an urge to push myself to become a candidate. I had told my party chairman, Petteri Orpo, who's a good friend of mine, that, for him, I am a solution, not a problem. So he decides the direction in which he wants to take me, and I'll then follow.
You're sort of a tool.
I guess so, yeah. I don't want to instrumentalize myself. But
I was going to ask you, because we were now talking about your brilliant career in politics, and I was going to ask you if this is kind of like the next step, the next stage, and something that you want to achieve for yourself as some kind of a personal glory. But now you kind of answered before I asked, because you just mentioned and pointed out that you feel that you have something to offer, that the call has come from the environment, the geopolitical situation, I guess.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I mean, 2 points on that. First, I wouldn't use the word brilliant, because I think every career is good, I mean, I keep on talking about this with my friends and with my kids as well, that you shouldn't define yourself through your professional career. I mean,
No, definitely.
it's one way of finding meaning in life. And sometimes you have to challenge yourself, and you have to accept that in the line of work that I've been doing, you quite often fail as well. I mean, it's part of democracy, right? So you have to accept that. But having met, hundreds and hundreds of ministers and heads of state and government and so-called brilliant people, I've come to the conclusion that, they're no different from anyone else. So you define your own career and your own life, I think, through meaning. The second point is that I've always been a fatalist. So I believe that, you can, as I say, dream, believe, work hard and succeed. And that to me means that, you have to dream big. You might have a calling for something. Then you have to believe that you can do that. And then you have to work hard. But that's when you also have to realize that not all hard work is rewarded. You need an element of luck as well.
Sure.
You see, I became foreign minister in 2008 because my predecessor was involved in a scandal. And it just wasn't in the cards. And in any case, I wasn't the first person to have been asked for the interim solution. I was the second. So, you have to be at the right time in the right place, and then things just happen. And, I don't think I was ever supposed to become prime minister as well. I kind of wanted to become commissioner. Yeah. But then my predecessor as prime minister and chairman of Kokoomus wanted to do the commission job, and I ended up as prime minister. Yeah. So, you just have to take what comes at you and be very grateful that sometimes you get lucky based on the hard work that you've done.
Yeah, but still you are a hard-working person. And
that I admit, yes.
Yeah, and this also is visible through your personal life. You are extremely dedicated to sport, and you also there push limits and you test yourself. You are a triathlon and runner.
Yeah.
How do you, is this kind of attitude of pushing, searching for the limit and constantly training and doing, is this something that belongs to your personal life, or is it just you and you apply that towards in everything you do? So politics, everything, family,
no, it's just me. I mean, I guess if you'd ask my friends or my wife or my kids, they would smirk a little bit and say that, Alex takes stuff seriously once he gets excited or something. So I have to admit I'm sometimes an on-off person. If I get really enthusiastic about something, then I try to find out everything about it. So when I became an academic, I sort of was awoken to the academic life only at university. I wasn't a brilliant student in high school because it wasn't my thing. I loved sports. And then when I got to university, I said, wow, this is the thing. So what do? I sit in the library for 4 years and soak in as much information as I can and almost feel like I need to catch up to understand what's going on. And I quickly realized that, well, if there's this thing called a Bachelor of Arts, I want to go all the way and do a PhD. So that, so I take it seriously and I go the full mile. And I guess the same thing in politics, if I love something, I really want to give my best. And part of sports is that as well. I mean, to a certain extent, I do sports, of course, to, achieve personal gratification. But I also want to test my limits. I'm not saying I'm a biohacker or anything like that. But the bottom line is I want to test, how far can this mind and this body go. And then I also think that for work, body might not be a traditional instrument of a politician, but I've always felt very strongly that if I want to be the best that I can be, that means that I have to eat fairly healthily, I have to sleep enough, and I have to exercise enough. And you have to be very careful not to exercise too much. So I always test my limits a little bit.
It's scientifically proven anyway that your body carries your brain.
Put it this way, say if I have a hard day at the office, which I quite often do, if I had a choice between drinking 1 bottle of wine in the evening and then waking up in the morning and make it to the office, or not drinking that wine and exercising 1 hour in the morning, which will make me more energetic. It's quite simple math. So.
Absolutely. Well, I subscribe to that. I will go with you training for 1 hour.
Good.
So are you as much inspired then by the presidential position as you are in what you described, that you go the further mile and you try to know everything, and you are so you take ownership. So are you as much inspired by these possibilities as you are and you've been before in your life achievements?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't go into races lightly. So it's not like I go there, as we say in Finnish, just with my left hand and sort of, whistle around and go half-heartedly. When I go, as hard as I can. And I ask a lot from myself and, of course, also from my team and the people that I work with. Now, I guess the good thing I have in this race is that my background is fairly suitable to the job itself. I've worked with 3 presidents myself. And also the fact that I have a passion for things Finnish and things international, which basically means that my best job I ever had, I have to admit, was being foreign minister. I love that.
Okay.
It was just
How
sort
so?
of, well, I felt that I was able to represent the country that I love. I mean, it might sound a little bit corny to someone, but I also felt that I was able to do it in a fairly good way. Communicating in English or French or German or whatever the case might be, and I hope that I can do the same as president. But of course, the race is long. You never know how these things happen. As we speak, we've had 12 weeks of campaigning behind us and 12 weeks ahead of us. So you just have to take it day by day and give it everything that you have, and then see what the end result is.
What do you see, aside of course that there are technicalities and of course the president has a certain role, but what do you see in the president of Finland? What do you see in it as a role?
Well, I think it has, and sorry, I'm the 3-point guy, but this is almost constitutional. So I think there are really 3 essential roles that the president has. The first one is to lead Finnish foreign policy together with the government. So it's very much a foreign policy role. And in today's world, not only bilateral relations, but also NATO. The second role is commander-in-chief, and that's quite often forgotten. There's a direct hierarchy between the commander-in-chief, in other words, the president, and the head of the armed forces. And that's very important because it's the president that decides on war and peace, of course, together with the parliament. No
it's
question
the
about that.
supreme general.
Yeah, you could say that, yes. Of course, I'm a lance corporal in military ranking, but and my son just passed me in military ranking, so I'm in trouble when he comes home for the weekend. I'm going to have to salute him. It's a bit tough. But
isn't that the best that your kids are?
it's
taking
absolutely
you
fantastic.
Over? Yeah.
I've told him that I don't want to live my life through you, and I don't want you to live your life through me. But during the year that you're in the military service, can I hear all the stories? And, yeah, Dad, go ahead, no problem. The third role that I think the president of Finland has is to be a bit of a value, if not leader, at least someone who can unify the country or talk about common values together. So you can't be a divisive factor. If I simplify things, I mean, you can't be. In the U.S., the president is quite often divisive because, you have Democrats and Republicans and now a few different formations.
It's polarizing
exactly,
the full country.
And the president should not be a polarizing player. Quite the contrary, should be an integrating person. And you have to work at that. So that means that at times, you have to, if not compromise with your own values, at least be able to listen to people in a different kind of a way and not condemn them.
So what are your values, and what do you think? Well, the values you leave and the values that you think that you should represent for Finland.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can dissect them in many different ways. So if you just look at my campaign program, it's quite simple to say that I want to have an open, secure, and international Finland. So that's the starting point. I'm also very much again three. Yes, I did when I was writing the program. I asked my team, can I write 10 theses or 6 theses? And then they all said, well, 6 is the maximum, but 3 would be quite nice. So that's sort of the starting point. But I'm very much, I think, a child of the post-Cold War era, which means that I'm an end of history type of person who believes in liberal democracy, in equality, in human rights, fundamental rights, in protecting minorities. I believe in justice, in rule of law. I believe in globalization. So these kinds of things. So I believe in the Scandinavian Nordic welfare state.
Yeah.
So I'm very European, very Nordic, and of course my DNA is very Finnish.
Yeah, you definitely also have shown to be liberal, and you've been quite open about it. And this globalization, you've been pushing the role of Europe, the European Union,
Yeah.
and you wanted it to extend. Now, of course, we face a situation in which such talk that you have had become much more important, because the way the countries work together at the level of the European Union became much more important.
Yeah.
Do you believe that we can become more, we can work together with the European Union in a much more compact way, even if there are so many different countries with these different cultures, with different stages of economic situation, with different power? Do you still believe that there are levels of discussion in which we are all equal and should be all equal?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I guess the starting point is first of all to understand that the European Union is not a utopia. It usually goes through three phases. First, you have a crisis, then you have chaos, and at the end of the day, you have a suboptimal solution. That's what European integration is about. It exists for four simple reasons: peace, security, stability, and welfare. It's more than an international organization, but less than a state. It is the most sophisticated organization of integration in the history of international relations. We pool sovereignty in areas where we used to not do it. The European Union has exclusive competence in currency. We don't have that instrument anymore nationally. Not in Italy, not in Finland. Trade, competition policy, customs. These are all things that we decide upon together with Europe. We have good patches in Europe and bad patches. Bad patches are those when we disagree. Good patches are those when we agree. So when Putin and Russia attacked Ukraine, I've never seen us more unified. When the COVID pandemic hit, I've never seen us more determined in getting the vaccines. Was it pitch perfect? No, but it was there.
Still, each country adopted the rules and implemented different kind of boundaries.
In comparison to where? To Africa, to Asia, or to Latin America?
That's also true, but when I think about unification and conformity, then I see that each country has been doing just about what they wanted to go about.
I travel around with an Italian COVID pass because I got my vaccinations in Italy, and I did that, and I took the test regime whenever I traveled in Europe. So, you can always find sort of the black spots in the discrepancy, but at the end of the day, we're not a state, so you can't sort of snap your fingers. And in any case, I think COVID was very much hit and miss. So it was a new situation for us, but we managed to contain it, fairly well. So what I'm trying to say is that Europe will never be a utopia or perfect. It'll be always sort of, suboptimal, and we just have to live with that. At the same time, I believe that we're not seeing an era of deglobalization, but the regionalization of globalization, and that could potentially be quite good news for Europe because we've been practicing this stuff for over 70 years.
If you're going to step as president, you inherit quite a difficult situation geopolitically.
Yeah.
Can you comment now the situation? We used to have during the Cold War we had a bilateral. We have two poles pulling, and now it's the world became much more complicated, and there are pulls and pushes from everywhere. And what is Europe position in this?
Yeah, I mean, it's a dangerous question to ask in a podcast because I've been working on a book for 3 years, which is called The New World Disorder. And it basically has, 3 parts and 9 chapters. So the first part is about the order of the world. So used to be bipolar, then unipolar, now multipolar. And how the war in Russia affected that. Then the second part is about the balance of power. And there I divide the world into 3 spheres of power. The global West, about 50 countries that try to defend the current world order and its rules, because we created it and it's beneficial to us.
Which area do you put inside
Europe,
this sphere?
Europe, North America, South Korea, Japan, New Zealand, and Australia, and Israel to a certain extent, I guess. And then you have the Global East, which is a second sphere, about 25 countries led by China, followed by Russia and Iran, very different powers to China, which is strategic, tactical, and patient, unlike Russia, and 22 countries that vote with these three countries in the UN. They try to break or at least change the current world order. China less so, because it's benefited from the rules-based world order, but nevertheless it does try to do that. And then the one that's going to decide it for me is the Global South. And I know it's unfair to lump 125 countries into one, but in Asia you have India, the most populated nation in the world, taking the lead. In the Middle East you have we have Saudi Arabia with a very strong position. In Africa you have Egypt, Nigeria, and South Africa. And in Brazil you have, in Latin America you have Brazil. And these are so-called middle powers or emerging powers, which play a bigger role in this. So I talk about a disorder because it's trying to find its bearings, and it's going to take about 10 years. And then thirdly, in the book, I have a third part which talks about the dynamics of power. And you have basically three options. One is competition, one is conflict, and one is cooperation. And I think that in order for us to contain competition and avoid conflict, we have to have more cooperation. So it's a rather complex world at the moment, and that's what the next president is going to have to deal with.
How will we establish cooperation with Russians?
Oh, that's going to take a long time. I think Russia will continue to cooperate. It's gravitating towards the east, not towards the west. So I think the base case is that our relations with Russia are going to be pretty much non-existent until, of course, the war ends, and then we have to start having a look at what the European security structure looks like. But right now, there's an iron curtain there, and on one side of the iron curtain, you have Russia and Belarus, and on the other, you have about 45 European states, actually including countries like Armenia and Azerbaijan, or, of course, Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine, which are detaching themselves heavily from Russia. So it's going to be complicated.
You're putting China together with Russia.
Yeah, it's almost like Russia being a vassal of China, in the sense that in 1990 the size of their economies was equal. Now China is 10 times bigger. So China can play with Russia.
Yes, and it is a silent player because they have been playing totally different kind of game.
Sure thing.
And then there are dependencies in other sectors like technology and information that anyway bound the spheres, the West spheres, with these other spheres. But there we are working on a partnership. Do you think the partnership will hold?
Well, I mean, it depends on how you call a partnership. I think
the
way
cooperation.
I mean, I think the European Union calls it China a competitor and a systemic rival, and that's saying quite a lot. If I simplify the world, you have two options. One is to decouple completely. I think that's impossible. So therefore go for the second option, which is de-risk. Understand that there is a path dependency between the West and China, including the United States. A dependency which the United States never had with the Soviet Union during the Cold War era. I mean, nowhere near that. And the truth is that we'll continue de-risking, and then we'll have to be very strategic on our thinking about rare earths, about chips, about different technologies. I wrote a piece in the Financial Times in 2016, which was for China, Europe is the new Africa. So my argument was that the way in which China had been mining rare earth or earth in Africa, it was mining technology in Europe.
How is to run this campaign? You've been talking about 12 weeks behind and 12 weeks still forward. How intensive this is, and how clear and focused you can be, and where do you recharge your batteries?
Yeah, I mean, it is quite intense, of course. It is my 8th campaign, so I'm quite used to it. This is different in the sense that it's actually a very positive campaign, because a lot of people, even though they don't support candidate X, Y, and Z, they want the Finnish president to succeed. And I keep on saying that, when you're prime minister, a lot of people want you to fail, but when you're president, because foreign policy for us is existential, they want you to succeed. How do I keep it up? I'm quite systematic about it. I think everything starts from the calendar. We have an extremely good and efficient team. We have a good team spirit. And I think if everything is okay in the calendar, I'll cope with it. So that basically in simple terms means that I get enough sleep. I wake up quite early at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I prepare for 2 to 3 hours. And if I'm prepared for the day, I'm quite happy to go and hit the tarmac running. So and then of course you have to eat well. You do a little bit of exercise. I've dropped my exercise to 1 hour a day, so that sort of gives you energy rather than saps energy from you. These kinds of things, and you just have to keep it quite cool in your head as well, and not get flustered when things go bad, or not get too excited when things go well. You just have to take it day by day, week by week. And right now my target...
Reset your head every time.
And exactly. And so I became an official candidate on the 28th of October in a big party congress. That was a big moment. Yesterday, on the 14th of November, we had the campaign opening. That was a big moment. We just take it day by day. Next break is going to be at Christmas, so I take about 10 days off.
Last flash question. You also say that there are fails and failures in your life. Yeah. What is failing for you?
Well, failing is probably not achieving a goal. So it can be, losing an election, or it could be, saying something stupid publicly, which has, hurt someone. It can be about not getting a job that you wanted to get.
How do you manage that?
I think it comes from sports. You have to understand that you win some, you lose some, and it's a question of how gracefully you cope with it yourself. And of course, because I was basically voted out of the biggest office that you can have in Finnish politics, president, then it's a very public failure. And once you realize that that's part of democracy, and you understand that you shouldn't be looking at your own identity through the public eye or your career, I think you're quite okay about it. And as I said, we started this conversation about defining success, and I think for me success is finding meaning in life. And if you accept that, then you also have to accept that at times you fail. Right now, I find a lot of meaning in the fact that people get inspired from this campaign or from what I'm doing, and it gives me a lot of strength and energy. But I fully realize I can either win this election or I can lose it, and then I just live with it.
Sure. And I think this talk was for sure inspirational. We got to see who you are and your ideas behind. So thank you a lot for your time and all the success. Let's see, maybe we see after the final election, and maybe we talk later.
Grazie mille. It was my pleasure. I really enjoyed the chat.
Thank you. Have a nice day.